Chapter 11. The Bridge. There's a certain bond that forms when two people are thrust into a life-or-death situation. A codependent link that cements itself early and lingers without the knowledge of the beneficiaries. Perhaps it was a silver lining in my convoluted web of a coping mechanism because for some reason it formed. I allowed myself to attach, to care, and in many respects to feel. It was a peculiar sensation, and the reasoning for which lies behind one painful truth. For my entire life, I have resigned myself to the fact that I am a selfish person, somebody who has refused the cries of help from those who need me and is satisfied living a withdrawn and distant life. Ever since that realization took hold, it trapped me in a cycle of acceptance. I accepted my growing list of flaws and transformed them into lies. I would tell myself they were unique traits that made me a special person. If I was happy, why would anything else matter? Being alone on the island didn't make me happy, though. I couldn't lose Gregory anymore. I was becoming addicted to his presence, an addiction that was overruling my list of lies. Saving Gregory brought me more joy than anything else in life, a pure joy that wasn't riddled with hidden guilt or anger. I finally cared about someone else. It was a strange feeling. "Walter, I can never thank you enough," exclaimed Gregory as he tried to find his breath. I could hear his heart beating from his chest and his eyes welled with pain. "They bit you, didn't they?" I asked. His head dropped as he gritted his teeth. Gradually, he lifted his pant leg and revealed the bloody truth. His attempts to hold in pain were futile, as gashes were dug deep into his calf. Gashes that housed dozens of fallen teeth. "Well, that answers that. Do you know what we have to do?" I pried, praying he'd make this process easy for me. Gregory took a deep exhale and nodded. "Do it quickly," he croaked. Hastily, I plucked and pulled the scarlet-stained teeth out from his leg, as a choir of screams filled the air. It wasn't until the last white dagger was pulled that I realized the result of my latest surgery. Fluid gushed out from his leg in droves as his head fell onto the floor. Without thought, I ripped my shirt off my back and tried to tie it around his wounds, tight and firm to avoid any further bleeding. "Walter, you need that more than I need." "Don't be ridiculous. Your leg is a tad more important than this disgusting shirt. It's already half red from my nose anyway. Your guts could finish the job," I assured him. As my cloth flew off, I noticed the toll my body had taken from the island's grasp, admittedly left with my ribs plunging through my skin, a sea of welts and a thin layer of grime that coated my entire flesh. I felt like a homeless anorexic, and yet that was the least of my problems. While the storm above shook and quivered, it waned over time. Gregory had grown quiet, trying to contain his fits of pain. Every so often his leg would jolt in agony, but not one complaint fell from his mouth. Little things like that garner respect for most, but in my eyes, I just felt bad for him. If he had a knife jammed in his heart, he wouldn't even say a word. I compress a lot in my life, but to compress physical pain? That's an unbearable feat, one I could never conceptualize. Stars burst through the cloudy atmosphere, illuminating the world around us. Stark beams and trunks laid scattered on the swamp floor. Half of the land's canopy trees seemed to be mangled and butchered. Fresh chops that left trees in shambles, but not any of these leaves or branches were seen. Vanished in one fell swoop. "Someone's been busy," remarked Gregory as he knelt up from the floor to analyze the terrain. It was clear he needed distraction from the chattering of nerve endings pulsing from below. And of course, I was willing to oblige. "Any idea who it is?" I asked. "They have taken the tops of trees and moved them away. How far away, we don't know. What I know is that they are collecting it for a purpose." "Most likely shelter," replied Gregory. Perhaps it's a monster who likes to eat trees. Nothing would surprise me at this point, I quipped. Gregory ignored my drivel and continued. Oh, I'm serious, Walter. One person could not have done all this work. I think we are about to meet some new friends very shortly. The wheels of my head turned as an idea emerged in my head. I doubt they could carry them that far. If that's the case, we may be close to their shelter, right? I asked, fearing the response. Bingo! Exclaimed Gregory as he clapped his hands in excitement. Now, Walter, important question. Do you think we should try to find this mysterious shelter? It was inevitable. The next rung in our journey. There was always another pile of bullshit waiting for around us every corner. And there was no escape. Well, no. I don't see the utility in that, I replied. The last thing Gregory needed was another trek through the island's gauntlet. I had to voice my opinion, but I knew it wouldn't matter. When the man sees a mystery, he wastes no time pursuing its depths. Contemplation is simply wasted seconds in his eyes. To display his strength, Gregory attempted to stand up, but tumbled down onto his back, laughing while doing so. I'm just an utter mess right now, Walter. Do you mind? I helped the man up to his feet as his arm wrapped around my shoulder. Don't make the mistake of assuming everyone we meet is a foe, Walt. I very much prefer us finding them than discovering us intruding onto their illustrious home. Better that way. Yes, much better. I was in no shape to disagree as we shuffled into the fray of a jungle. Luck was on our side as there was no army of brush waiting for us past the entrance. In fact, much of the land was flat and empty. If one looked hard enough, one could detect a dirt path lying on the floor. A sight that made me pause, as it's not often dirt paths just appear in a jungle. Gregory already knew what I was to say before I had the chance to say it. I see it too. Fear not. Rabbit animals don't leave constructed trails. Whatever we are about to meet, it's intelligent. It's a good sign, he said. It was an idea he thought would put me at ease, but in actuality, an intelligent foe is something we've yet to face. We've also yet to die. One likely led to another. My mind brewed pessimistic thoughts as my feet plodded along the hickory-bricked road. Prepared for the next beast the island was waiting to conjure, the next level in its trite, demonic game. We crept along the sullen path, passing by a growingly apparent theme. Tops of trees dwindled with every step as the surrounding floor was barren and cold. Empty stumps lied stamped into the grass, damp and dreary in the rain. Water clogged the ground below us as it traveled through the clouds, deprived of any canopy obstacles to act as an umbrella. My skin pruned as the minutes ticked by. Gregory's limp grew into a steady walk. He was getting better at an ungodly pace. I didn't question it. At that point, questioning miracles would have been a waste of time. Our lives were proof enough. As our movements slowed with the passing hours, all my body could think of was rest. There was nothing else to think of. Our path grew dull. Lower and lower each tree's bark stood. Eventually we were just walking for miles in a monstrous marshland. Warding off the swarms of mosquitoes was the only form of entertainment my mind had. A lack of stimulation amplifies what little you have. What I had was a body fighting a vexing cycle of self-pain. Sitting chained behind a desk for 8 hours a day, color-coding paperwork and endless games of solitaire did not prepare me for those types of internal conflicts. Skipping boot camp and being thrust into the front lines of a physical war is a terrible strategy. Terrible strategies, though, are always preferable to death. And so I soldiered on as the endless array of fields approached. My shoes filled up with water as our steps fell deeper and deeper into the verdant slush. The fresh scars on the bottoms of my feet sang as the frigid foam nipped at my ankles. Gregory marched before me, without fear or worry. His bare feet splashing against the water as it sprayed against my knees. Eventually the floor beneath us performed a gradual plummet. The once refreshing break from the blistering wave of heat became a sharp fall into waist-deep and frothy mire. They say the human body was designed for marathons, our one redeemable trait amongst the world of animals. What they don't say is that a psychologically disturbed and malnourished human body is designed for marathons. And there's a reason for that. My legs were screaming at me as the taxing push through the heavy water took a toll. I waited for Gregory to admit defeat. Our expedition was getting us nowhere, but he never looked back, as if he knew where he was going. I couldn't question him. It was about time I quit doing that. I trusted Gregory. Boy, I had to. "Won't, you're not afraid, are you?" asked Gregory as he kicked through the sludge. "Afraid? No, not anymore. I've grown numb to fear lately. To be honest, I feel like I'm a passive observer, empty and futile with every effort to stabilize my never-ending fall from sanity. I'm just along for the ride at this point." He laughed. "Oh, along for the ride. That's a good way to put it." While I appreciated the vial of positive reinforcement, he probably wasn't even listening to what I had to say, spouting words to fill the emptiness choking our eardrums. I couldn't blame the man. It would be dangerous for reality to bleed into our minds. We were better suited clogging our working memory with small talk and shying away from the shotgun dangling in the sky inches from our faces. My heart swelled at the thought of a lie beneath the ocean we now inhabited. Images flashed in my brain of my baby birds screeching in the vortex of depleted claws. For all we knew, we could be next, pulled deep into the drink, never to return. My doctrine of peril fused to my expectations, a cognition that I once classified as fear. Drenched in my worry, I seemed to have stopped swimming, staring down at my vague reflection in the water, ignoring Greg's words etched in the air. "You have to admit, Walt, there's never a dull moment here. Sometimes it feels like we're on a vacation, and every day another event is thrown onto our itinerary. Every time I open my eyes in the morning, ideas bubble in my brain about what will come next." He was delusional. Not a new discovery in our interactions, but something that never ceased to intrigue me. And so, I decided to pry further, joining Gregory in his escape from what lied next. "I envy your outlook, my friend, I really do. Personally, I'm getting sick of our never-ending plight from point A to B to C and so forth. I prefer just staying in one place for a change. I think that's a fair thing to ask. It's easy, too. Just have to avoid getting chased by lunatics every time we close our eyes. And deprive ourselves of exploration? We'd be wasting the only opportunity this puzzle of a place offers us," he replied. Gregory was pulling ahead of me. An embarrassing thought considering his recent injury, but exercise isn't my strong suit, so if you don't mind cutting me some slack, I'd appreciate it. "I think you're confusing the silver lining with the whole picture, Greg," I yelled as my body faded into darkness. I was starting to think he couldn't hear me anymore. The distance between us was now impossible to measure. Stress was amplifying as I feverishly slapped through the water, yearning to catch a glimpse of my companion. "And another thing. Once we get back, we'll have so many interesting tales to tell. Sure, there's risk involved, but every little bump in the road will add to our story," yelled Gregory. His empty words were gradually consumed by the howling winds from above, his body still invisible, hiding from my side amidst the black fog. Our swim seemed endless, thwarting back and forth through the swamp. Above, the moon's luring glow failed to pierce our world, as the only notion of Gregory's existence was a spattering of water heard off in the distance, a sound that elicited a hint of reassurance until it evaporated from the air. I paused in the water, quietly floating alone in a pool, listening for any sound distinguishable amongst the waves of wind crashing above. Nothing was present to answer my call. Like a child lost in a store, I yelled for my father, hoping he would come rushing back to me. "Gregory! Gregory! Where are you?" I asked. A lightning bolt shot down my spine as my worries were formed before my eyes. "He's dead. Taken by the monsters as they feasted on his mangled corpse." These were the thoughts that boiled inside of me. I dove through the water, jolting my arms and legs as I flew through the wall of mangled muck. As every second ticked by, the horrid giant of solitude sprouted in my brain. As I kept moving, the water beneath me shrank in depth. Every kick was greeted by the turbid and weed-ridden floor. Like a viper coiling around my skin, they tangled alongside my ankles, slowing my pursuit. My pursuit halted by Gregory's emergence from the shadows. He was safe, alone and transfixed, falling mute under the weight of astonishment, his head aimed high, captivated by a stupefying presence in the sky. Out from the darkness burst a castle-like wall of wooden pillars. Woven and engraved they stood, a barrier warding off all who sought to enter. We were both astonished by the masterpiece radiating before our eyes. Together we hovered in an apparent moat that hugged against the underside of this dark spectacle. Gregory approached, placing his hand against the structure. His fingers danced up and down the base as he then turned and smiled. "It seemed we found our new friends." Our answer was now clear. Hacked and butchered bark was taken for a purpose. Protection lied before us, but for why that protection was needed I did not know. Gregory hovered in perplexity, dumbstruck by the advanced architecture. "These weren't made by monsters. My God. Humans crafted this," exclaimed Gregory. "Humans, huh? I've yet to see another human on this island. If they exist here, they're awfully good at hiding," I replied. Despite the darkness, I could see Gregory's twisted face as he beamed at me. "They're not hiding, Walter. They're living. Past these walls lies our escape. It's our chance, our only chance left to leave this place. It's probably wishful thinking, but I think we have to try it." "So what are you suggesting?" I asked, fearing the response. "I say we meet them," spoke Gregory, without hesitation. It was inevitability. How could I argue? Without a shadow of a doubt, it would terrify me, but so would never knowing. And so, we ventured forward, holding onto the rims of the barrier as we blindly strolled into the web of a stranger. The ground beneath us grew sturdier as we went forward, our bodies bathed in filth, reeking a foul stench that followed us everywhere we went. Over time, we got used to our pungent odors. Our potential new human friends, however, well, I dreaded the scent their nostrils would inhale. Our appearance was hardly attractive either. Gregory's feet, for example, were feathered, with lesions doused with fluid. His once lively beard was stiff and cemented by the mud's grasp, while his arms and legs were flaring crimson with kisses, courtesy of the horde of bugs infecting the air. I'm sure I wasn't any better, but to be honest, my main concern was our minds. Talking endlessly to a single soul fatigues even the most patient of humans. I was apprehensive of my ability to charm or comfort a new friend, and I was certain of Gregory's inability to accomplish such a task. He once tried that tactic on me, and boy, did it not work. Regardless, we pulled through, trudging along until our decrepit path vanished. The once straight and simple design was curving, and along with it came keen spears that coated the tops of the pillars. It was a more welcoming decor than fresh amputated heads greeting us, but it was still a cause for concern. "Look, Walter, right over there. Do you see it?" exclaimed Gregory. In fact, I did not. While the shield of clouds was subsiding, I still failed to see more than a few dozen feet in front of me, and so I shook my head as Gregory hurriedly pulled me with him. The two of us rushed forward, as I followed impotently, confused as to what it was he spotted. Then, suddenly, his discovery became clear. Protruding from the barrier was a dazzling amber ladder. Something so simple, and yet so odd to be vaulted into such an arena. But for some reason it stood around 60 feet high. As we approached, a troublesome noise could be heard echoing far and away across the field. Behind us was a wasteland of marsh, stitched and sown with thunderous footprints and blotches of weeds that soared from the dead floor. The acres of nightmare foamed with a cascade of fog that swarmed the surrounding air, coating the oasis in silver. As time dripped by, the chaos grew louder, catalyzing my companion to shake in tremors. It was a fear that erupted into a panic the second an array of figures emerged out from the pale haze. In response to the devil's emergence, Gregory bolted towards the ladder, while I stood, alone, listening to the calls from afar. In front of me stood a block of fog that was crumbling down, its illustrious cloak losing seams while the rabid howls grew louder with every passing moment. It may sound silly, but I waited, left listening to the profound screams which vaguely sounded like a chorus of barks, as if I was being chased by an army of bloodhounds. Cognitive dissonance locking my legs and sinking my feet into the earth, wondering what the next torturous toy had in store for me, and why it was left waiting behind the island's curtain. Luckily, instinct overrode my curiosity as I dashed madly towards Gregory. Like a fool, my focus went backward while I ran, feasting my eyes on the horrors that followed. Countless beasts galloped on all fours towards us, unhinged and wild, with their bloodthirsty eyes locked onto prey. Out from the fog they shined, powerful brutes coated up and down with pitch-black fur and scars that pulsed from their robust legs. The horde was built awkwardly, massive and cumbersome, deranged and manic as they pranced through the field uberly quick. Sprinters beguiled with steroids and bath salts. Oh, it's a mystery how I spent weeks on the island without encountering their claws. Their army stocked with well over 100 hounds, and each and every one of them was a weapon of mass destruction. My gaze upon their bone-chilling canvases failed to linger long, as I sped, transfixed upon the ladder's haven. Gregory was well on his way up the bark as he stared down at me from above. His once frantic face turned to ease as I reached the base unscathed. Steadily I rose, terrified at the prospect of falling into the hellfire that waited below me. Despite being well out of the army's grasp, they kept sprinting towards us, failing to slow even a step until the several torpedoed themselves against the ladder's feet, spearing themselves like savages against the fortress's wall and gnawing against its timber. My ascent up the ladder was perturbed by its incessant rattling, the jaws of the monsters below drilling into the aged wood like jackhammers. One mongrel even found the wherewithal to clamber up the first few steps, scaling the lumber at an even greater pace than I. "Keep moving," Gregory shouted, as my mind again fell into the trap of wonder. They were unlike any of the monsters I've encountered before. Thick and mangled snouts puffed out from their faces as their tails flamed high and still in the air. As if on cue, the moon shot a spotlight onto their dilapidated faces. Empty and enraged, each of them yearned for me, tricked and teased by the stake in the sky. Their howls amplified like wolves in the night, sparking more of their kind to come rushing to their aid. Droves of them watched as Gregory and I climbed to the top of the wall and cheered on their companion who was already halfway up the ladder. I now understood what the vast structure was built for, designed for protection against a battalion of brutes. Alas, they would not taste my flesh as I joined Gregory atop the tower. This did not, however, stop the daring demon from following us. That is, until Gregory stopped his ascent, and with the muttering of a single word, stopped him. "Platz!" boomed Gregory down the ladder steps, freezing the beast entirely. "Platz!" repeated Gregory, louder than before. In response, the creature's claws opened, and it went crashing down into the sea of its constituents, all of which were now still like statues, sitting on their hind legs like loyal pups. "Verlassen!" screamed Gregory, whose face was red to a pulp. At once they all trickled away, their tails between their legs, and their skulls drooped down onto the floor, sulking and angry, while several howled a deafening song in the air. The defeated growled, gathered, and rushed back into the forest of fog. Their bodies disappeared into the oblivion, as the sight of the chewed and snapped ladder appeared below us. The two of us sat in a cold block of silence, while each of us gathered our wits. I was left baffled and confused, while Gregory appeared somber. Walt, I didn't see them. We should have been more careful. I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking. I just saw the ladder and got excited. I could have gotten us killed," exclaimed Gregory, over his desperate attempts for breath. "One day they're going to catch us," I replied, struck by a ridiculous luck, left to race around in my brain while thoughts bubbled and fused. A human being can only be offered so many deus ex machinas before the clock stops ticking. It appeared my clock was warped and broken, because no matter what heaving pile of bullshit came to its way, it ticked and ticked and ticked. In utter disbelief, I knelt down and kissed the ladder as it saved both our lives. Once again, another helpful friend saved the day. "All right, Greg. What did you tell them?" I asked, blunt as ever, annoyed that an act could simultaneously save my life and shatter my trust. "Nothing," he gruffed, and then continued his journey along the wooden path. "Don't you fucking dare," I fumed, unable to let the man brush me off. "Excuse me," he coughed, smiling from ear to ear. His sly simper sucked me in, triggering a frenzy of neurons in my brain to fire a missile square into a box labeled Fury. Suddenly, coupled with the adrenaline still sputtering below my skin, my verbal filter had faded. "You know, Darwin warned me about you. He told me not to trust you, and I never knew why. But, and it breaks my heart to say this, but I think you're hiding something from me. I think you believe I can be fooled and played with, and that I can't see something that's obviously there. You've got a secret, Gregory Enola, and I don't care for secrets. Not this late in the game, not after we fought off hell together. I think I've earned some honesty." Gregory smiled, barely moving it while he glared at me, no longer looking at my eyes but looking past them, attempting to pierce through my surface and dig at what I was getting at. Walter. I'm not sure what to say. For starters, Darwin was an idiot," he laughed, clearly not picking up on the damage he was inflicting. "No, he wasn't. I was an idiot for letting his words slide, for not confronting you with them the second after they were said. I'm the idiot here, not him. But I will not let that trend continue and just let you walk away from this, or from whatever the fuck just happened, inflicting mind control on the lot of them and pretending it's normal, pretending it's fine. Mr. Mai, if you'd calm down for me, I can explain," said Gregory, who appeared flushed. It's rare he's ever on the defense, but in that moment he never appeared smaller. "I did to those mutts the same I do to my dogs back home. I commanded them to stop, to leave you alone. A reasonable request considering the circumstances, and doing so was natural on my part, doing to them what I have conditioned animals to do before. With a stroke of luck, it seems they've already gone through the same lessons I've taught in years past," he exclaimed. Whether we want to admit it or not, there comes a time when coincidence and luck need to be put aside. When they appear too often, if you're not even an ounce suspicious, then you're either blind or ignorant. And while it took far too long to figure it out, the red flag was now implanted atop my brain. Gregory Enola was not who he said he was. And regarding what that beast friend of yours blabbered, perhaps take it with a giant grain of salt. I wouldn't be caring for you and trying to save you if I wished any ill will upon you. You and I are in the same boat here. Men looking for answers and trying to find a way home. If we fight each other over pursuing those goals, then we've already lost. We have too many enemies, Walter. We need each other to survive. Don't let naivety blind reason. Without me, there is no you. Without you, there is no me. The naivety died in me a long time ago. It came and went with my innocence, and it took from me everything I held dear. But it also taught me a valuable lesson. Trust should be earned, not freely given. I can smell lies like a shark smells blood, Gregory. And you're lying. You're doing it with a smile, and the words are seeping through your teeth with ease. You're terrifying me, Gregory, and you don't even realize it, I sneered, vitriol sparking up and down my taste buds. These animals, Walter, just like you and I. They learn, they fear, and they learn again. Through it all, they are constructing themselves the best way to dispel their fears from coming true. Humans are adept at manipulating this truth, and as I gathered with Darwin, humans are the creatures who have taught these beasts everything they know. He spoke and understood English, for God's sake. I don't think I had to spoon-feed you that assumption. It was obvious if you gave them even an ounce of focus, claimed Gregory, proud as ever. You're right. Darwin spoke English, and yet you did not speak a lick of it to those monsters down there, did you? I jabbed. German, he corrected, his smile no longer present. Ah, yes, thank you. You spoke German to the horde, and they followed every word. And how did you stumble upon that nifty coincidence? Another obvious assumption I overlooked, or just blind luck? Intuition, he answered. Intuition. Oh, you're funny. You're quite the comedian, thinking your lies can keep getting past me. That's quite the joke, I sputtered, unable to harness the hurt my one and only friend was daggering me with. You want answers? You want the truth? Then how about we end this silly charade and meet the crazy rats who built this place? Find the men who tame these beasts and go home, avowed Gregory. And just so you're aware, I'm not lying to you, Walter. Both of us have fallen within ourselves since we've been here. It's hardly a surprise people aren't built to endure this torture. But you're not well, Walter. Your delusions seem to be coming back to you, but that doesn't mean I'll stop helping. You've carried me this far, and I'll carry you the rest of the way, kicking and screaming if I have to. My head sunk to the floor as I sculled along the haggard wood floor, searching for answers and marching towards the only trail of evidence I could find. A smattering of smoke in the distance, trickling up my nostrils and blazing my eyes as it could be seen spouting in the air. It was akin to the smell of a favorite candle, warming my heart and sprouting hope inside of me. You believe me, don't you? Asked Gregory, whose voice dipped in worry. I ignored his concern and continued to trek forward, preoccupied with the faint sounds of voices in the distance to rebuild my verbal filter. No, I don't, Gregory. But I want to, and I'd rather live in a world of want than a world of what I can have. So I guess I'll have to trust you. The two of us had never felt more distant as we traveled along the wall's edge, silent as a pair of strangers while we attempted to decipher the voices and chatter that was passing in the wind. I could have sworn my name was amongst the words being slung, but that was likely just narcissism blended with wishful thinking. Nevertheless, we were getting close, inching towards the doormat of the island's architect, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. I knew was pulling every little string that hung above our demonic sandbox. There had to be a purpose, because if there wasn't, then what was the point? There had to be a point. The potential for us to stumble upon another grotesque roadblock made the knot in my stomach twist and tighten. Nervous as always to meet someone new, especially when that someone may not even be human, potentially even alien. I was at a loss for logic at that point. Everything seemed possible, which made everything horrifying. Despite this, even through silence, I could tell Gregory was jittering with excitement, joyous and festive at the thought of his next discovery. As we climbed up the final slope of the barrier, we noticed something tragic. No surprise there. Our path was halted by an immensely wide gap, one that housed a deep and treacherous fall. Boulders and rough terrain dressed the floor in a sinister garb, almost cartoonish in nature. If one were to attempt trekking down something that steep, then you'd likely label them either suicidal or someone suffering from anthemalia. And before you run and grab a dictionary, anthemalia means not possessing eyes, so scaling down the mountain was not an option. Not even close. Also, venturing on another leisurely climb wasn't very appealing. No idea why. The disparity between where we stood and the nearest land stretched almost 50 yards, and while it wouldn't have surprised me if Gregory was mutant, from what I understood his ability to fly was limited. Luckily for us, flight wasn't needed. Between the ledge we stood and our new batch of friends was a bridge. In the wind it swayed, doing its best to deter any potential walkers with its spindly ropes and cluster of splintered wooden planks. Planks seemingly held together with Elmer's glue, with several either missing or a footstep away from snapping. This is a joke, isn't it? Another vial of exposure therapy to test my fear of death? Oh, how clever, how cute, I rambled to myself. At that point, not even following along with the words spewing from my mouth. Just my id, champing at the bit to rip the world limb from limb as it so often attempted to do to me. It's never easy, isn't it? Gregory blurted as he placed his bare-sized 14-foot onto the first plank, catalyzing it to sink and creak. Welcome to the island, where logic is shunned and absurdity is welcomed, I replied. And you would think people who made those walls could make a half-decent bridge, I commented as I tugged at the rope. Like I suspected, the material was ancient and as thin as twine, a fact that didn't add much comfort while I made my way onto the swinging death trap. To his credit, Greg tested each plank before putting any of his weight on top. Meticulously he walked, acting as my personal test dummy as I followed from behind. 300 pounds between the both of us still made the bridge seep downward, but not enough to put us in a panic. We simply trickled forward and prayed for a brisk, leisurely stroll. For a time we thought it would be safe. We thought it would be easy. My goodness, we were stupid. Mother Nature, the bitch that she is, blew her winds into gusts, playing with the two weathered rats in her maniacal maze. And as the bridge's swings grew violent, our once calm composure evaporated. Despite the circumstances, we continued on, foolhardy and determined to conquer the island's elements once again. Like before, Gregory spouted another story as a way to cope with his stress. What he said, I'll never know. My mind and eyes fixated on the planks below me, and the deafening pavement that called from beneath. Unlike most, I rarely possess a fear of heights. Surprising considering the truckload of anxieties I hide from the world. In that moment, though, as I took my late-night stroll with death, all my mind could focus on was making it 1 centimeter further. At a sloth's pace, we succeeded, almost finishing our journey devoid of any injury or danger. Almost. And notice the theme here? Abruptly, I clocked my head against Gregory's back and looked up, dazed and confused. Gregory froze, his voice silent and his breath sung, rough and rapid. I peered over his shoulder to see what the issue was and was greeted by a sight that haunts me to this day. Side by side, two familiar figures emerged. One, a brolic bastard white as snow, holding a torch that shot smoke into the air. The other, small and spotted in nature, a youthful specimen holding an axe. They were a disturbing sight, that much is true. Grotesque and stocky, but not foreign by any means. Oh, I knew what they were. Darwin had killed one of their kind not too long ago, snapping its neck before it had the chance to snap mine. But Darwin was gone, and both of them stood, empty and still, intrigued by what we would do next. Trapped in a Mexican standoff with a pair of trigger-happy savages, flames danced and swirled in the arm of the cream colossus, flickering against the wiring of wood. It wouldn't be long before our bridge was ash, and I think the beast knew it. His emerging sneer revealed that truth. Gregory's prayers could be heard as he mumbled under his breath. I tapped his shoulder and teetered back the same way we came. "Let's go," I whispered, desperately wishing for logic to find its way into my companion's head. Gregory took a deep breath and shook his head. "No. You were right. We have to know. We can't keep running away from them, Walt," he exclaimed. Gregory then walked towards the figures, his hands high in the air. "Hello, my brothers. It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Gregory Enola." "What's your name?" he spoke, masking his hysteria with a meek, enforced friendliness, his voice high-pitched as if he was talking to a child. The burly beast approached the bridge, his distorted teeth bare and open for the both of us to see. An intimidation tactic, to be sure, and one that Gregory greeted with a smile. He kept moving slowly and surely along the mangled steps. The ebony and ivory blotched figure was a child. Circumspect and unassuming, it hid behind its much larger ally, clutching its axe closely, almost afraid to reveal it to us. Instead, it glared in bewilderment, doing its absolute best to hide the wary nature in his eyes. "We are not here to fight you. On the contrary, we are here to meet you," Gregory continued. His genial attempts fell on deaf ears as the large beast growled and raised his torch. His face glowed with the warmth of the fire, shining on a picture I wish I hadn't seen. Silver blonde and peachy hair coated his face while his eyes sparkled a scarlet red. Demonic and wide they stared. He then stuck out his hand and smiled. "Well, aren't you going to introduce yourself?" he asked. The beast flashed a brief look of confusion before he aimed his torch at Gregory's chest, pushing him backward while it laughed and cackled. "Well, this isn't a nice way to greet a guest," rebuffed Gregory, who was growing tenser by the second. The monster then spat on Gregory's face, chuffed to the bits as he teased like a toddler. "Fine. We can do this the fun way," commented Gregory, who snatched the torch from the ghoul's grasp and heaved it across the bridge towards the spotted creature who dove away from its flame. The titan then bull-rushed forward, knocking Gregory senselessly to the ground. In and out of consciousness, Gregory faltered, coughing away while it stomped on his chest. A sudden rage fueled me as I screamed at the beast. "Get off him! Get off of him!" I yelled, hoping foolishly that it too received a human training. To my surprise, it worked, as the beast stopped and looked up at me, analyzing my face for but a few seconds until it smiled. "Water," it grunted, as he then sprinted after me. The chaos erupted in my brain as the monster lunged at me. Vault after vault it attempted to grab while I scuttled backward. Eventually I simply grabbed its outstretched arm and ripped him over the edge of the bridge. Mirroring a wrestling routine I watched as a kid, and to my joy it worked to perfection. His fingers clamped onto the threads of rope as he dangled off the brink. Gregory rose from the floor, his hand covering the welts that now rested on his chest. There was a bolt in his eyes I'd never witnessed before. He seemed animalistic and deranged. I cried in laughter at the beast, who left screaming out desperate pleas for help. The innocent and once muted beast then entered into the fray as it flared a scream of fury and darted forward to help his struggling companion. Gregory then turned and stomped his foot into the monster's mouth, and it fell onto the floor, clutching its jaw in anguish. His axe sank into the depths as blood sprouted from his teeth like a sprinkler. "Walter, run!" Gregory blurted as he zoomed towards the other side of the bridge and plucked the fallen torch from the floor. Without hesitation, I followed orders, racing as fast as possible across the feeble steps. I even attempted hurtling over the spotted beast, who lay defeated on the planks, but as his arm shot into the air, I came crashing to the floor. Several planks plummeted into the void as I looked back up at the monster. He was not smoldering or enraged, but instead rather somber. While holding his now thrashed face, he looked up at me. "Stop, Walter! Stop!" It spoke through cracked teeth. My confusion now amplified as tears fell from its face. "Don't listen to him, Walter!" barked Gregory. "Who are you?" I asked the fallen foe. "A friend," it replied. "We've come to save you, to protect you from Gregory, to protect you from the doctor," he wailed, spitting bloody teeth from his mouth and over the edge of the bridge. Before I had the chance to respond, I was being dragged by the tufts of my hair as Gregory was pulling me back onto the safety of land. Enraged, I shoved him off me and stared back up at the two beasts, one cowering on the floor and the other screeching for aid. "He said my name, Gregory! They both did! I don't understand!" I blurted. The child started crawling towards his companion, meekly shuffling through his draughts of pain. It broke my heart, the helplessness both possessed, and as Gregory attempted to light the bridge aflame, I couldn't help but intervene, shooting into the air and standing my ground. "Stand back!" shouted Gregory, clenching the torch in hand as I stood between murder and mercy. "They're finished. You don't have to do this," I pleaded, once again full of guilt at the thought of killing an innocent creature. "The day you stop acting like a child with my job will get 1,000 times easier," snapped Gregory, roiled at the prospect of sparing their lives. "I'm not even going to force you to move. You're just going to have to use that brain of yours and come up with a decision," he exclaimed. Competing thoughts battled in my head, and yet no clear answer was found. Unable to formulate a counter-argument or articulate a safety valve, I stepped away and collapsed to the floor, allowing Gregory to extinguish any chance for answers those monsters could provide. He then doused the ancient bridge with fire and lit it up in a ball of inferno. Rope burned profusely while the dangling beast howled. The child was forced to veer past its companion and find refuge on the other side of the gap, left to watch his friend burn and cry, tears streaming down its face while he stood helpless. Alone it resided where we once stood, alone and afraid, now staring straight at Gregory, locking onto his eyes and soul. Gregory smiled while the beast witnessed its friend plummet onto the rock, dead on impact, its screams echoing down the walls of the abyss. "I hope you're ready for the truth," Gregory exclaimed as he coldly turned and walked into the brush, continuing along our tumultuous path to the skip and a whistle. A path marked with a myriad of questions and a bundle of answers that were about to be thrown our way, whether we like them or not.